you so much for being on the programme tonight. It's great to have you. So let's talk about your workers' rights bill, shall we? It's a big part, of course, of your election campaign. But it feels to me like a lot of the major changes have been a bit delayed. You know, unfair dismissal, maternity pay from day one, years away. You know, the right to switch off kicked even further down the road. I mean, you guys ran on a change platform. What happened? Did you just lose your confidence?
Not at all. Some of the changes that are in this bill, on a personal level, I have been trying to bring about for 14 years. You know, for example, the restriction for unwanted 0 hours contracts, that's been a massive problem in our economy for such a long time. And today is the day when we finally get to publish the bill that shows the way forward so that people aren't stuck not knowing how many hours they've got next week and not knowing what their income's going to be. So, of course, we will work with trade unions, with businesses, with charities and civil society to get this right. And that's not a quick process. But this is a big day today because we're publishing the legislation that is going to put a platform underneath working people.
One of the big things for so many people, particularly those with caring responsibilities, is the right to request flexible working. You know, the press release sounds pretty great. It says, you know, flexibility is at the heart of the legislation to upgrade the law to ensure it's fit for modern life and a modern economy. But I'll be honest, you know, I've looked at the actual bill and, you know, you can request flexible working, but then your employer, can refuse it on the following grounds: burden of additional costs, detrimental effort on ability to meet customers' demand, inability to reorganise work among existing staff, inability to recruit additional staff, detrimental impact on quality, detrimental impact on performance, insufficiency of work, planned structural changes, any other grounds specified by the Secretary of State. I mean, that is ridiculous. It sounds a bit like, yeah, you've got the right to request flexible working, but that's a bit like giving someone the right to, you know, buy a ticket for the lottery.
The most important thing about that clause is that it changes the default. It changes the default assumption about what employment is like. And I think that we'll see how it goes. And, you know, maybe we'll, as you say, maybe this will have an effect in the way that you're suggesting. I think the thing is, if you change the default, I think we'll see that expectation change. And we know that, like, in our history, you know, we had the Equal Pay Act in the 70s. That was a really important, momentous moment. Not everything changed overnight, and we needed to keep going with the fight for equal pay. What we're putting in front of people today in a bill is the principles that we want to see. And you know, people have opinions about whether it will work in this way or that way, and that's fine. We'll work with people to get it right. But on flexible working, it's about changing that principle.
You say it's about changing the defaults, but right now you can request flexible working, right? You obviously you can, but then your employer can refuse it. It feels to me like that's exactly the same position after the bill.
It's not the same because you don't have the right to do so in law, and also you
ask,
read out.
There's no one stopping you asking. You're not banned from requesting it, are you?
No,
it's just the fact that you might not get given it, which is exactly the same as the bill.
Hang on a second, Sophie. The point about all of those clauses that you read out is that your employer has to give you a proper reason. And that process will make a difference, I believe. However, that is not the only change in this legislation today. There's lots of things. It's a big bill, and taken together, it's about the principle of putting a better platform underneath people. We've got too much poor quality, low paid work. In some cases, low pay and poor terms and conditions is some really highly skilled work, and that has got to change. So this is a big day today for all those people who've campaigned for a very long time for working people to do better by our economy.
You are consulting on a right to switch off. You know, is that something that you kind of follow yourself? Do you call your team members, you know, out of working hours? Does Keir Starmer give you a ring on a Saturday?
I laughed because I thought you meant me personally, and I try very hard to switch off sometimes, and mostly it doesn't work. I try to make sure that we have good principles at work. You know, obviously in everyone's working life, occasionally there's an emergency, but yes, you try to respect people's personal time at weekends and when they're having family time. I do think that's an important principle.
Is there a problem with the fact that we're all on WhatsApp now? I mean this kind of genuinely. Like, it's unlikely that you're going to, you know, necessarily give someone a ring on their house phone at 9 p.m. at night, but you might send them a WhatsApp message. Is that acceptable if an employer, if your boss or your manager is WhatsApping you outside of working hours?
I think people do need time with their families, doing things outside work to give them time to relax and enjoy themselves. I think that is really important. And when I think about the mental health pressures that people are experiencing, having something to do and somewhere to be that's not work, I think is really important. We will keep talking to people about that and thinking about, what that should look like. But outside of this really important momentous day today, where we're publishing this bill that's going to change the rights that people have at work, as a general principle, I think it is important that people are able to spend social time with their friends.
Another story that we're covering on the programme today is a new report revealing the huge delays that victims of rape and sexual violence are experiencing in the court system. I think the average wait for something to go to trial is 2 years. Now, I know it's something that you'll feel strongly about. I don't have to explain to you the impact that that's having on victims. Are we failing victims of sexual violence?
Goodness, it's absolutely devastating. Unfortunately, I've been working on the employment bill and other things like job centres today, and I haven't had time to read it yet. But that sounds absolutely devastating. And I know colleagues of mine, Jess Phillips and others, are working really hard to turn this around, because that is not acceptable. It's absolutely devastating when something as horrific as rape happens to you. To have to go through that nightmare to get justice is not acceptable. So it's got to change.
I totally understand that you've got your head in something else and you won't see the details, but we're all, of course, aware of the delays that have been building up in the court system and in the justice system. The budget's coming out. We've got some tough decisions about spending. Why is it that the Ministry of Justice Department budget is not protected when we're seeing the impact that these delays are having on victims of crime?
Well, I'm not the Chancellor and we're not at the budget yet, and I know you wouldn't expect me to comment on that directly. The thing that I would say is that the Ministry of Justice and colleagues are working very hard to turn this situation around. There's some difficulties. I visited my own rape and sexual abuse service only recently and heard about the difficulties that people have, not just in being believed, sadly, but also in finding the evidence. So it is about resources, but it's also about some of the technical difficulties now with mobile phones and other things. But we've got a mission to halve violence against women and girls. That's right across government, and ministers are working hard to make progress on that, as you imagine.
OK, thank you very much indeed. It was great to have you on
Thanks so
the
much.
programme tonight. Thank you.